Hi there, I'm Matt and I've been living and working in Vietnam since 2010. My channel's about sharing updates about Vietnam, including my knowledge and experiences living here. In this video, I answer some of the questions that have come up in my regular live streams over the past couple of months. Questions that I haven't had time to answer in full during those streams. So now I get to do that with you. Righto then, let's get into it. Now, the internet's flush with stories and anecdotes about unsuspecting newbies to a country being taken advantage of. In fact, there are plenty of YouTube channels out there that highlight this. You know, scam this, scam that, avoid this scam in Vietnam, 5 scams that will ruin your trip in Vietnam. There's even one on a supposed Apple scam that got nearly 1 million views. Luckily, the poor YouTubers got their $7.50 back. Anyway, one viewer recently asked the question on this channel as to how best to avoid being taken advantage of in Vietnam. So basically, how not to get scammed. And to be honest, my initial thought was, well, what's the answer to how long's a piece of string? Because like everywhere, there are people out there just waiting to take a piece of you any way they can, whether it's a kidney or a large chunk of your life savings. Note to anyone out there thinking about taking something like that from me, I'd suggest taking a kidney. But as I got thinking about this question, I realised that if you're constantly worried about being taken advantage of while you're here, you might as well stay at home, as long as your home's not on this list. Because it does happen, and it will happen. And it's a kind of rite of passage in this part of the world, and how badly you get taken for a ride, of course, can come down to the type of personality you have. Are you gullible? And the life experiences you've had. Do you live in your mum's basement? And then, of course, how you handle the drama, and how quickly you get back up on that buffalo? But there are actions you can take to lessen the likelihood of being diddled in Vietnam. Firstly, don't get hung up on being taken advantage of, because at some point, no matter how small or how big, it'll happen as you go about your life here minding your own business. One way to buffer yourself from the hucksters out there is to surround yourself with good people. Attend networking events or chambers of commerce meetups where you can find a good mix of locals and foreigners. Looking for what you're looking for, friendships and a few drinks, and maybe a sneaky shag. Hell, even take up pickleball. Nah, don't do that. Another one is just to trust your gut feeling. Many things are out of your control in a new country, but trusting your gut is something you have control over. If something doesn't feel right, give it a pass. There's nothing to lose by being patient, because other opportunities will come up in the future. When it comes to romantic relationships, there's still a belief out there that pulling a foreigner is the answer to life's problems, financial or otherwise, like permanent residency in the States, for example. Nah, scrap that one, didn't age well. Just keep in mind that when you take on a local in a relationship, be prepared to take on the family as well, and everything that comes with it, like the extensions to the family home in the provinces. But all in all, the Vietnamese are generous and always happy to help you. In fact, it's more likely that you'll need their help more than they'll need yours. And the vast majority won't take advantage of the vulnerable situation you're in. Although, please disregard what I just said if the vulnerable situation involves ladyboys on Bui Vien Street at 5 a.m. As a rule of thumb though, just don't assume any favours done for you won't come without any conditions, because at some stage you'll be expected to return the favour. And my last but best tip, make friends with the locals as soon as you can. I hate to break this to you, but you're gonna get sick in Vietnam, and you're probably gonna get things that you've never had before, in places you've never had them before, and at an intensity that you've never experienced before. I won't go into details, but I can remember back in my first year, I'd come from the pristine environs of Australia to the throbbing heart of Saigon's Chinatown. I had it in my head that I was gonna live, 100% like a local. which was fine. But 5 days a week, twice a day, I had to commute to work on the back of a motorbike, 30 minutes each way through wet markets, congested streets, behind vehicles spewing petrol and diesel fumes, in the heavy tropical air. And as a result, I fucking loved it. But before you can say bogan, there was a catch. Each month I came down with some kind of respiratory illness, mixed in with a bit of the old, Saigon squirts. Not pretty at all. Now, this was all to do with my body adjusting to the new environment. Did I drink too much? Probably. Did I take too many chances with the street food? Probably. Did I hang out at Bar 5 too much? Probably not. But you've still gotta live. Only just. And besides, I came here for something different from the usual. And I got salmonella poisoning, staph infections, probably hepatitis, A, because of the unhygienic food, and 2 bouts of COVID, and a bad case of yellow fever. So what's the deal when you come down with stuff like this? Well, the upside is that much of it can be treated with over-the-counter medicines. Just about everything is available over-the-counter without a prescription at pharmacies that are everywhere, even in the provinces, in case something happens while you're building that extension on your new girlfriend's family home. Now, if you need to visit a doctor and your self-diagnosis online leads to just 3 weeks to live, then there are plenty of good medical centres, at least in the major cities, and they'll do a good job at patching you up and telling you what you probably already know. But it can be expensive for the privilege if you don't have medical insurance. I've always been covered by medical insurance here. It's just a peace of mind thing that I have. So if you're like me, I'd recommend doing some research on insurance companies before relocating here. Look for ones that have pre-approvals for payments with medical providers and hospitals, because medical centres and hospitals here want to know up front before they botch your surgery. Just kidding. And they want to know whether you're good for payment. So having insurance with a company hospitals know and trust takes a lot of stress out of an already stressful ordeal. As for me, touch wood, I've never been involved in an emergency, but I've had some small procedures done over the years and I've never had any problems. If you're watching this and have spent some time in hospital here, let us know in the comments how it went and what we should look out for in the medical system here. The other option is that if you do get diagnosed with a death sentence, Thailand's only an hour's flight away, because where else would you want to see out your final days? Living in a foreign country can be like tiptoeing through a veritable minefield of culture bombs that feels like one could go off at any moment, especially in the beginning. Fortunately, the Vietnamese don't get too triggered by our cultural missteps and instead are more likely to find us amusing rather than offensive. Hand you a beer and probably won't even bother letting you know you've fucked up. That's what I've always loved about the Vietnamese. I mean, not just the beer drinking, but they have a no-fuss attitude to things and just let everyone go about their business or go around them. I had a joke for this spot, but thought better of it. Although they're very proud and have the ability to come together like no other, as we well know, when the occasion requires it, like when the national football team plays or on special holidays like Det and Reunification Day, or when a Chinese tea company meddles with a map. But Vietnam isn't an overly religious country, at least in terms of Christianity in the way, say, the Philippines is. So there's little chance of offending anyone in that way. Just follow the rules at religious sites and you should be all right. But keep in mind the Vietnamese adhere to Confucian values, which is patriarchal in nature and where respect for elders is next level. So don't bother making a scene when an oldie pushes in line ahead of you, for example, or elbows you out of the way in a crowded space. It happens to all of us. I guess the thing to remember is that you're the outsider here. You'll always be a foreigner. So to that end, you'll probably need to work that little bit harder at being a good citizen, or representing your country and culture. Don't force your values or way of life on people here. I see it a fair bit on social media. You know, foreigners have strong views on things like dog meat restaurants, equality in the workplace, and the environment, for example. Things are changing with the younger generations leading the way, though, and while it might feel like things are moving slowly on social issues like these, trust me, a lot has changed for the better since I arrived in 2010. And finally, I think one of the key things to remember is to try not to assume things. Easier said than done, I know, when you're hardwired to your own culture, but as they say, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. So ask for clarity over and over until both parties are clear on what's expected. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Are you clear on what I'm saying? Are you getting my drift? Is that something that resonates with you? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Okay, I've covered this a little in previous video, but it keeps coming up. So it appears that it's something people are genuinely interested in or concerned about. And fair enough too, because the Vietnamese are known to like a drink. One of my live stream viewers has asked, I notice many of the locals prefer to keep their own alcohol recipes in their houses, a sake of sorts. Is this safe to drink? Well, firstly, Vietnamese rice wine, you might see it on signs as rượu gạo, among other names. Rượu is the generic Vietnamese word for wine. Aussies, you can say it like rue, you know, kangaroo, but with a deep voice. Anyway, it isn't commonly made in the family home. Families generally don't distill it themselves. You know, it's not a case of the tight-ass weird uncle down in the back shed trying to save a few bucks. But having said that, if it does happen, these days it's more likely in the rural areas, and that's where I had my first experience with it actually. In fact, the kind I had was banana wine. It was a very strong moonshine made from fermented bananas, and I'm amazed I still like bananas to this day, and that I'm actually here to tell the story. So perhaps the person who asked this question had seen tea or herbal medicines in jars inside family homes on a previous visit and mistook it for rice wine. I don't know, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's pretty uncommon for families to distill their own rice wines instead of buying it. So keep an eye out for the different kinds of rice wine, and I suggest if you want to try it, check that it's been distilled by a reputable brand, which means it will have been licensed to distill. These are getting worse, aren't they? Anyway, if it comes in a plastic bottle or bag, it's probably best to politely refuse, or better still, run. Now, just on fake booze, be mindful that there are still fake wine shops out there selling international brands. You'll be able to recognise these places because they're usually small and have floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with whiskies, vodkas, and the old Vietnamese nightclub favourite, Hennessy. You may even see bottles being sold in local markets, so stay clear of those. It's also important to note that if you plan to go out in the backpacker area, like Bui Vinh and Pham Nhu Lao streets, it's highly likely that the spirits or the liquor being sold in the bars and clubs in the area is fake. So my advice would be to stick to beer unless you're actually drinking at a quality establishment, because there are actually a few of those in the area these days. Just be careful, if the shots are cheap, then there's a good chance that it's fake. And who knows where that'll lead. As avid YouTube watchers, you'll be familiar with the videos about Vietnam and its so-called fake markets. If not, just search something like Saigon Fake Market. What'll most likely come up is Ben Thanh Market or Saigon Square. So if you're into your fake stuff, then by all means hit them up. Not that I'm endorsing the fake market, black market. But anyway, the stuff sold there is well known to be fake. Even the sellers will tell you that. It's the fake stuff that's not as obviously fake that you need to be careful of. I mean, I've already mentioned fake alcohol in popular tourist areas, but other things you should be wary of are things like fake taxis. You know, the real fake taxis. Oh, what am I saying? Anyway, I think you get what I mean, but with ride-hailing apps here like Grab and Sun SM vehicles are the light blue electric ones you see getting around town. Sun means blue or green in Vietnamese, which is kind of grey, isn't it? Anyway, with those services now, it's much easier to hail a legit cab here. But on the odd occasion, alerts go out about fake Grab motorbike drivers. So always book through your app and don't just assume someone who is who they say they are. Something else that can be faked and that you might not be aware of is fake coffee. Yes, believe it or not, fake coffee has been a thing here for a long time, for as long as I can remember. And it can be easily masked when you order a café soda on the street because of the condensed milk. So what constitutes fake coffee and how can you identify it? Well, that can be tricky, but the first thing is that it's more likely to be sold on the street at a cheap price, and I'm thinking anything under 20,000 dom. Then take note of how dark and thick it is. If it's syrupy and looks like sump oil from a motorbike and tastes less like coffee and more like something you can't explain, then it's likely to be fake, because fake coffee is often made with substitutes like cornstarch and soybean powder, and there's even been cases in which charcoal and powdered chemicals from batteries have been added. No wonder it gives me a buzz. Now you might be wondering why, when Vietnam is the second largest producer of coffee in the world and has some of the best coffee in the world. Well, often the prevailing attitude here is still cheap is best. Coffee is one of those things that the average person isn't going to pay 40, 50, 60,000 dong for, especially when the average cost for a bowl of pho in Saigon is 50,000. Look, I know a lot of the hype about Vietnam focuses on its coffee culture, but the next time you're thinking about ordering a cheap café soda on the street, also think that it might be fake. And if you're okay with that, then go ahead and do it. And come to think of it, sitting on one of those small plastic stools on the footpath, sipping coffee with everyone else, is an authentic Vietnam experience. And while you're at it, you can count the number of fake noses passing by on the ladies. Another truly authentic Vietnam experience. Righto, that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it and learnt something too, and that I've helped you in some way make better decisions for your trip or life here in Vietnam. Now, I'm going to go and have a coffee and read your comments while I'm at it. No fake accounts, please. Okay, take care and stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.